A most original and creative talent in our business. Would you welcome Mr. Orson Welles?
Ladies and gentlemen, Orson Welles again, come to call for another visit.
Good evening. This is Orson Welles.
Stay tuned.
Right after this episode.
For our discussion.
Hello, this is Orson Welles speaking. Next week marks the end of June. Next week marks the end of the OPA. In the better restaurants and hotels, the ghouls are celebrating already. For the profiteers, the battle's won. Right now, Sunday, June 23rd, to all practical intents, to all working purposes, the OPA is dead. The boom is on, friends. Just watch your dollar dwindle. And meanwhile, somebody is buying another senator another drink. Somebody's getting a congressman's wife some new nylons. One more week and the lid goes right off. One more week and the profits start piling in for the profiteers. All the profits they can hide from the tax collector. I mean, all the profits they can bury in the backyard. Now, I'm going down to Washington with some friends tomorrow to talk to the president about it. It says here in my crystal ball that the president is going to tell us that he, the president, hasn't enough support to do anything. We then will tell Mr. Truman that the people are behind the OPA, that that's where we would like to see Mr. Truman, behind the OPA, helping to push. But probably we'll just be making conversation. Mr. Truman is more pushed against than pushing. That thing his shoulder's leaning on ain't no grindstone, it's the 8-ball. My little magic crystal shows some handshaking all around a dreary trip back to New York. Goodbye, Mr. President. Goodbye is right. I hope not, but goodbye. Some ugly stories are in circulation. I hear there's a deal cooking, a deal to keep price control on some food, on some rents, on some clothing, a deal to cut the anchor chains off everything else. I don't need a crystal ball, and you don't need a radio commentator to tell what that means. Before this, I've asked you to write letters to your congressman about the OPA, and you wrote the letters. I asked you to send telegrams. You sent the telegrams. As we stand today together, a helpless, hapless herd of taxpayers on the teetering brink of inflation, there's only one thing left to ask for. I ask you to go on strike. That's right, that's what I said. Let's go on strike. Let's walk out on higher prices and stay out until they stay down. We, the consumers of this country, are being played for suckers. Maybe we are suckers, ordained suckers, by destiny and by nature stuck with suckerdom. But like the man said, men sometimes are masters of their fate. The gold bricks aren't all bought up by all the people all the time. Even here in the darkness of the sheep run, we show a fitful flash of shrewdness. Those with eyes to see could spell out the words written in the sky over all those empty seats at the Yankee Stadium last Wednesday night. And these were the words. Not all of us are boobs. Not all of us are boobs. So, let's not pay a nickel more than anything is worth. Let's not spend a dime, a thin dime, a very thin dime we don't have to spend. Not all of us are boobs, but the food and clothes and lots of fancy new products we'd like to buy are hid away from us, hoarded up in the hope of higher prices after the 1st of July. That stuff's going on the market sooner or later, and if the price zoom doesn't come off, it'll be sooner. Not all of us are boobs, but pretty soon it won't be easy to prove it. And what can we do before then? We, the people, we, the consumers, we can go out on strike. If the OPA goes off, how about buying absolutely nothing from the week of July 1st to July 7th? How about it? How does that sound? I'm sure it sounds crazy. But what could be crazier, if you please, than sitting back and letting a greedy ring of get-rich-quick experts pump the buying power out of your paycheck? Suppose there was a flood or a fire, some such disaster, and your town was cut off from food. Still, somehow, for a while anyway, you could feed your family. Well, inflation's a disaster, the real thing. It's a national calamity. Why don't we treat it like one, acting quickly and together? Why don't we just plain put our foot down? Why don't we stop buying everything for a week? The retailers won't like it, but they're not who we're shooting at. We're after the wholesalers. Let the wholesalers hear from the consumers. Something audible, something with threat in it. Then they'll start selling the stuff, and at decent prices and in decent quantity. But of course, we consumers won't go on strike because we consumers aren't organized. And of course, if we were organized, we wouldn't have to strike. The truth has a dark and ugly face, and there's no point in masking it or trying to. Tomorrow, I'll pay the president that visit. And I'm afraid that after July 1st, we'd better all get ready to start paying for everything through the nose. Here's a letter. Dear Mr. Wells, it's now 3 weeks since my husband was laid off work at the button factory where he was employed for a month. While he was there, he wasn't exactly grateful for the long hours of hard physical labor without any breaks or rest periods, but now, after fruitless searching for another job, he realizes how fortunate he was to make $40 a week. He's a natural-born salesman, but unable for the first time in his life to sell himself into any kind of a job that pays a living wage. $30 is the top salary paid to returning war veterans regardless of the size of their families. Although he's a skilled sheet metal worker, when he entered the Army, he's now told that his 5 years of service for his country set him back into the apprentice class in that trade. Mr. Wells, what are we going to do? The tragedy of our situation is that we're only one of thousands of veterans' families forced into such poverty. In this land of plenty, with its stirring productions, its new explorations in the fields of science, we can afford none of the new refrigerators or other marvels that will be rolling off the assembly lines within the next few years. We can't even afford shoes for our shoeless feet. Now the lid is blowing off the OPA with prices in milk and butter and meat rising all the time. The big man with all his power to wage strike wars against the worker, to paint the family man black for wanting a living wage, is taking the food out of the mouth of our very small baby, to be born within the next 2 weeks. Sincerely yours, Mrs. Ernest Schenck. That's a letter I got in the mail the other day. We've made it a custom on this program to read letters, and for the letters we use, we send a radio. So, the lady who wrote the letter you just heard gets a radio. It's a very nice radio. I very much hope that what she hears on it in these next months will bring her happiness and encouragement. But she didn't write that letter to get a radio. I'm terribly afraid that she wrote for advice. Mr. Wells, she says, what are we to do? And I'm supposed to answer. There's a baby coming in 2 weeks. Her husband's been laid off work. His only chance is for less pay, and prices are going up. They're going way up. Mr. Wells, she says, what are we going to do? Well, last night, after the show, I put her letter in my pocket. And I went out on the town, it being Saturday night, and I sat at Toots's and at the Store Club for a while, and at El Morocco. I didn't get any younger. I didn't get any wiser. At dawn, I walked up to the plaza and watched the water and the fountain and the pigeons in the grass, alas, and tried to find a thought for the new day. But no thoughts came and no answers. No answers for a woman whose veteran husband needs a better job, who's afraid of what it's going to cost to feed her little baby. The last horse-drawn cabs in New York wait by the plaza these early summer nights till it's time for honest men to go to work. Lovers take the half-hour cruise around the park as late as sunup. And there's the occasional lonesome single like myself. I'm comforted by riding the park. When I'm in New York, I charter a carriage in all seasons, and I've made the half-hour cruise in many moods. Never mind about my mood this morning. Consider the condition of my cabbie. He, being the dean of the drivers on the night shift, a worthy old warrior who last night lost a battle with a bottle. Surely his second. We'll call him Mike Anonymous. Well, Mike started off with me into the morning mists, carrying his own private fog along with him as he drove. For a time, I watched his jaunty silhouette under the topper and noted the sharp vapors of the essence of juniper. Then my attention wavered. It shouldn't have, for so did Mike's. The next thing we knew, we were climbing across a steep swatch of grass on our way to the statue of Daniel Webster. Liberty and Union, said Mike, waking from a deep dream of peace and reading the inscription on the pedestal. Now and forever, one and inseparable. Then all three of us looked up into the grim, graven features of the senator, all three of us being Mike, the horse, and me. We'd come close to a crack-up, but I was the more exquisitely startled because in that pallid light, and with the sick moon behind, fainting away into the morning, Mr. Webster's monument shocked back into memory an old, old bad dream. I had the dream often as a child. It concerned bronze statues, weathered green statesmen and poets collected in imagination from all the parks I visited, most of the countries of the world, solemn and sizable figures given in the dream to stepping down from their pedestals at sight of me and giving chase. I don't want to know how many sweaty, teeth-grinding nights I spent fleeing from all that distinguished statuary. I can still hear their metal footsteps tolling on the cobblestones of the nightmare. Dr. Freud and old Madge's Gypsy Dream Book can explain this unpleasantness however they may. I don't care what it means, and I'd hoped it was gone with the growing pains and the collywobbles. But this morning, just as we charged full tilt into one of the real and original ogres, there was a giddy moment when I thought maybe the nightmare was prescience. And as a wreck seemed sure, the dread, all hot and cold, came over me that the old chase was over. Mr. Webster had caught me at last. But I was too quick for him. After much painful maneuverings, Mike and the horse and I regained the road and resumed our half-hour's cruise through Central Park. My own nightmare then put me into mind of Mr. Mr. Jimmy Cannon, the sports writer, who this week had a nightmare all over the front page of the New York Post. It was a newspaper story, but it read like Norman Corwin narration. Mr. Cannon was canonized for it in the New Republic. That highbrow weekly, in an eager flush of appreciation, is reprinting the piece in full as a striking sample of our current literature. Also, the New York Post has raised the author's salary and launched him on the syndicate. Now, the piece in question was a description of the Lewis-Kahn fight. And the Lewis-Kahn fight wasn't much of a fight, but it was an event with some sort of a beginning and a quite definite conclusion. And, well, here's how Jimmy Cannon, the sports writer, covered it in the only newspaper story on the front page of his paper. I quote, "Once, dreaming with morphine after an operation, I believed the night climbed through the window of my room like a second-story worker. I thought the night had forsaken the world and, shaped like a fat man, walked through my face and up into my head," unquote. Mr. Cannon goes on like this for 2 full and full-blown paragraphs before we are informed that Mr. Lewis knocked out Mr. Kahn in the 8th, or as Jimmy put it, when Kahn fell off the rim of the conscious and crumpled into the dark privacy of the night he alone possessed. Mr. Cannon goes on like that for hundreds and hundreds of words. The editor, it seems, told Mr. Cannon to write just as much as he wanted. He did. Since his medium is the daily press, you might say it was too much and too soon. Over on page 60, it gets really good, though, and I mean really good, and I'm not being sarcastic. That's over on page 60. My kick with Jimmy Cannon has to do with page 1, since I'm an ex-New York Post columnist myself. He can call it sour grapes if he wants to, but I just can't go for that guff about the night crawling into Jimmy Cannon's brain, not on page 1. Somebody should take the purple ribbon out of Jimmy's typewriter. That boozy mist that does beyond the bogism is, for my dough, unworthy of page 1, and what's more serious, it's unworthy of Jimmy Cannon, because Jimmy Cannon is one of the best writers in America today. He has a keen, affectionate, and creative ear. He has the language ear, and that's a rare and precious gift. Damon Runyon has it. Ring Lardner had it. Sports writers they were, too. Read Jimmy Cannon, you'll see what I mean. If they don't run Jimmy Cannon in your newspaper, ask for him. You'll be glad you did. Last Monday, he wrote a column about Joe Louis. And in it, he said just this line, in a great column. Joe Louis is a credit to his race. Naturally, I mean the human race. A man who can write a piece like that one shouldn't be bothering us with bad dreams about the night walking through his face like a fat man. Even if that's a good way to write a news story about a boxing match, what kind of a bad dream is it? Worst bad dream I can think of is just fighting one round with Joe Louis. Well, by the time these thoughts had found such organization as I've been able to give them this morning, the sun was up and we were coming at full trot back to the plaza. The day was already seeping in under my eyelids like a thin spinster with 3 eyes, like Swifty Morgan with a satchel full of snappy cravats coming in out of the rain. And while all this was going on, the letter from the lady whose veteran husband's paycheck isn't going to be enough for the baby they're going to have next week was burning a hole in my pocket. That's just what it was doing, burning a hole in my pocket. If Jimmy Cannon wants to find another, fresher phrase for it, he can have it, and the job of answering that letter. With my blessings. Now it's time to say goodbye. Thanks for listening. Please join me next week, same time, same station. Till then, I remain, as always, obediently yours.
This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Well, Jello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. I'm joined with Terry Phillips and Vincent Longo and Catherine Fuller-Seeley. We have another episode of Orson Welles Commentaries for you. This one's another busy political one, and let's just go into it. Vincent, what stood out for you on this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to purposely avoid the politics at the beginning because I think Terry and Kathy and everyone else are going to talk about that. So it'll be a way to sort of come back to that. I'm actually going to talk about the final third of the broadcast, which is by far the most unfocused. I might even say stream of consciousness. I sort of think Welles, I don't know if he just didn't know exactly where he was going, but he gets to some interesting points, and we learned some things about Welles that I didn't know, and I'm not sure anybody really talks about. And so the first thing that we learn is sort of we get an idea of the extent to which of Welles's celebrity status. Several times over the last commentaries, he's mentioned where he goes after performances of around the world. Again, he's in New York. He's mentioned Toots Shor's bar particularly many times, which for people who don't know that wasn't a super fancy place itself, but it was a celebrity hangout known for its charismatic and heavily drinking, able to drink owner. But the other places he mentions in this one that he went to were the Stork Club and El Morocco, both of which were very high-end clubs known for celebrities and very fancy. And so, for Welles, just having sort of said like he was pondering what working class families are going to do because they can't pay their rent while he goes to these fancy clubs, I thought was like kind of strange and kind of like ironic, actually. I'm not sure he realized the extent to which he was sort of saying, well, I don't identify, I'm not a working class person. In fact, I don't have to worry about that. So I sort of thought that was he wouldn't have done that if he wouldn't have thought about it. But the other thing we learn is Welles's affection for sports writers. Now, most people don't think of Welles knowing anything about sports, and I'm not completely sure that he did. However, everybody at this point knows boxing because boxing is the big sport. Joe Louis is the main sort of sports celebrity that everybody knows, so that's not surprising. However, the fact that he says that the greatest newspaper men of sort of his generation are sports writers is pretty shocking. Admittedly, his reasons are very Wellesian, right? He says, particular Jimmy Cannon. He mentions a couple other ones. Jimmy Cannon. Let's see. Does anybody remember the other one while I'm trying to find it? Oh, here we go. Ring Lardner and what's the other one? Runyon. Damon Runyon. Yeah. So he says they have a language ear. They're really poetic. If you look up their writing, it actually is very good. Admittedly, though, Jimmy Canyon is the only true sports writer on there. The other ones wrote poems and plays and short stories. The other thing that he's interested in them is sort of as racial sort of progressives on racial issues. He mentioned specifically Jimmy Cannon's stance that Joe Louis is a celebrity for all humans and not, simply a black celebrity. So, we don't get it just because Welles is reading about the Yankees. There's a certain interest. The weird thing, though, is Welles is not old enough to know anything about Ring Lardner. Ring Lardner died in 1933. However, he was very loved by modernist writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald and others that Welles really appreciated. So likely he would have known that. He also was famous for writing about the 1919 Black Sox scandal. And so it's likely that Welles would have known that. However, the fact that he both praises Jimmy Cannon and critiques him is strange, I find. First of all, because he spends so much time saying Jimmy Cannon is so great, but also his beginning was terrible. But I don't know if Welles realized that he also told a weird dream story that segmented into this that made very little sense. I don't know if he did it reflexively, like as he was trying to make a joke about how ludicrous it is to talk about your strange dream. Welles is about this statue that chases him, but he never really makes that explicit. So that sort of supports my point that this is very stream of consciousness because Welles does the same thing that he critiques. And he also, is sort of talking about working class issues and then going to the fanciest places.
And I was struck by the same thing you were, Vincent. He essentially reads this letter that is saying that she needs help. And then he sort of after that doesn't know how to help her, and then just kind of goes off in a different direction. And I just thought that it was like it jarred him or something, even reading it that time, and just threw him off. And I think that was interesting. The other thing I thought was interesting with this episode is at the very beginning, I believe he says the actual date. He says June 23rd, I think, in this episode. And I don't think he's ever in any of his episodes given us the exact date. He'll say, oh, it's the week before Easter, or it's the week after, whatever. But he doesn't often say the actual date, I don't believe. So I thought that was
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does that though, I think, because his thing is about counting down OPA, right? So
Right.
he's saying it is the 23rd of June. The OPA will be done on the end of this month. So I think that's the only reason why he brings up the exact day.
What are our thoughts on it? Let's go to Kathy. See what she thought.
Oh, well, I'm
I'm
hoping Terry will talk more about the politics too. I was really, it started striking me how often Orson read out letters from women.
Mhm.
And he's giving the credit from the woman who was the whack in the entertainment unit, this woman from the wife of a veteran. I appreciate his sense of sort of gender equality that was very rare, in this time, because 1946 is all about sending all the little women back home. They shouldn't be Rosie the Riveters. They need to give the jobs back to men. And so, in hope, I was almost. So I wish that he'd been brave enough to say, "Well, hawk that radio and sell the $20 radio I'm sending you and do something with it." But that's it. It did seem stream of consciousness. The other thing that struck me is I'm going to go to Washington and talk to Harry Truman. Talk about celebrity on a stick. So he can be so you're a humble, obedient servant. But then, hi, I'm a 35-year-old guy, and I'm just going to go to talk to Harry Truman because I just do. So.
Right, for no reason too, because he says this isn't gonna work at all. I'm just gonna go to DC, talk to Truman, and Truman's gonna be like, sorry, guy, So like, it's a sort of wasted trip to DC that he can just do because
But with just such assumptions that of course Harry will see me. His door is always open to me because I'm Orson Welles. So he's 35 years old. So
and does nothing but make fun of Truman. I mean, the other thing is like the fact that he can still get this meeting after sort of emasculating Truman 2 episodes ago is shocking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you, Vincent, do we know, did the meeting take place? He actually did go to.
I believe it did. I looked through some things. I couldn't find exactly what, I couldn't find any definitive evidence which said that's happened. There were some other loose suggestions that it was going to happen, so I'm not sure. I mean, clearly nothing came of it, really. OPA has a even more complicated history after this point, but nothing came of it if it did happen.
Well, and I can see Truman's people saying, look, this guy's thrashing on you, and he's kind of listened to by a lot of people. And we know that once you stroke his ego some and talk to Orson, usually he becomes where he cares about you and will defend you more and things. So maybe you meeting with him, even if he doesn't get anything out of it other than getting to know you, maybe he'll lighten up a little bit. And that could have been why they went ahead and arranged it as well. The other piece I was going to mention really quick was just the letter itself. We've talked about letters and whether they're real or not real or anything. This one feels totally real because I cannot see him writing a letter that kind of dumbfounds him as to what to say and what to do about the letter. Essentially, he's reading this thing going, okay, you're in serious trouble here and you can't figure out the way out, and I don't know how to help you other than send you this stupid little radio. And like you say, Kathy, I almost expect him to say, instead of the radio, in lieu of the radio, we're going to send you the same amount of money the radio costs, and then you can buy a radio if you want or use it for other things. I don't know. It just seemed awkward. Terry, your thoughts?
Well, you're all wrong. I'll tell you why after this important plug for Imaginary Theater. Though our last episode does deal with time travel, and I've discovered that far more people than I realized love that genre, and I love that genre. And listening to these Orson Welles commentaries, to me, is a little bit like time travel. We get to go back to that era, look at the world knowing what we know now, and then project forward what's going to happen. And we know what's going to happen because it already happened. We know the history since 1946. And what Orson Welles proposed in this commentary was not nothing. He said, people, go on strike. Don't
Yeah.
buy stuff. Let's not let these rich, powerful politicians, greedy people in Washington take away our Office of Price Administration. We need to control prices. Otherwise, there'll be inflation. And it turned out he was right, of course, because there was, of course, this was an era of strikes and shortages. And what I always love is seeing how history repeats itself. What's going on today, all these years later?
Today.
We've got shortages. We have unfairness. We have labor unrest. We have businesses continuing to try to take advantage in many cases of working people. And we have celebrity involvement in politics. Yes, of course, Orson Welles could have a meeting with Harry Truman in much the same way that a lot of famous people today can meet with the president or other governors and other politicians. So more things change, the more they stay the same. Yes. And was Orson Welles this young upstart? Yes. But was he famous? Yes. And could he get away with stuff? Absolutely. So I didn't find any of this surprising, nor did I find it surprising that eventually Lear pulls its sponsorship and ABC pulls the plug on these commentaries because it was too controversial. The very thing that today, by contrast, we seem to like in media, eventually led to Wells' undoing. And maybe, as we've talked about in the past, it was also the fact that he could be kind of difficult to work with at times.
Right.
But in this particular instance, it was because the heat got too hot, even for Harry Truman and even for ABC and even for the Lear Radio Company. And we will see in the coming weeks and months that he'll continue pushing the limits and eventually lose his platform.
All right. Yeah, I agree. I think you're 100% right with all of that. And I'm glad you pointed it out because I was hoping you would, because I was like, okay, we got to talk about the strikes and him saying that they need to stand up for themselves and boycott and the whole thing. I thought that was interesting, and the ties to today.
And yet, how ironic if he's calling for a consumer boycott and then this poor letter writer, they don't have enough money. They're already at their end. There is nothing, left in the cupboard at home. Yep. for them to sustain a consumer strike. So
right.
No wonder he has no clue of what to do. So
right, rhetorically, the letter works brilliantly. I mean, I do think Kathy, you're right about Wells having a platform for female writers. I also, though, wonder, he uses the letters often rhetorically, and they're often like to paint a very sympathetic or sorrowful picture. And so I do wonder if he's sort of playing on gender stereotypes here a little bit. I mean, that's a problematic assumption, saying that the letters are going to skew masculine or feminine. But assuming that for a moment, I mean, her letter is definitely like, my husband is trying, he can't get work. And then he's sort of using that to say like, well, if he can't even barely pay the bills right now, what happens when there's, there's higher prices? The other thing, to Terry's point, I think we need to remember how controversial calling for a strike would be. I know we need to go quickly here, but the manufacturers blamed strikes in part for these high prices. And so for Wells to say, you need to do this, this is the only way, is sort of saying that, wow, we're going to make the problem worse potentially. And in fact, people do sort of strike after this, and it kind of works, although Congress doesn't quite bring OPA back to its former strength. And so it sort of is a partial plan, a partial fix that doesn't end up working. But Wells ends up being very correct here. And we sometimes criticize Wells as sort of economic theory. And he's right. Inflation goes up, people strike, it comes back, sort of works for a little bit, and then it gets, kiboshed again. But
100%. Well, that is a great place for us to stop because luckily we can continue this conversation next week as Orson continues to have commentaries. But I love our commentaries for all the shows, and I thank you all for being here. And I hope you all enjoy this commentary, which is really nice. Really clear at the beginning of it, and then towards the end it starts getting a little less clear, but it's still very listenable. But you just never know what we're going to get for sound quality on these things. We get what we get, and we're just so glad we have them at all. And like Terry says, it's great to hear the reflections of how it echoes to it into today and the things that are going on today. So again, thanks and enjoy, everybody. See you next week.